All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome to another Learning Tech Talks, where we are living at the intersection of business, technology, and human experience. Like the new intro, I've been practicing that one. I like that one better than what I had before, but I'm really looking forward to this. And if the backstage conversation is any indication of the kind of energy and fun that we're going to bring to this conversation, I think you're in for a real treat. So to navigate this conversation with me, we're going to be talking about virtual experience. And I use the word experience intentionally because there's a difference between virtual training and virtual experience. So to navigate that with me, I've got Jakob Knutzen. He is the co-founder of Butter, which I couldn't help but say everything is better with butter when I was preparing for this one. But thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to it.
Christopher, it is lovely to be here. I'm very excited.
And this has been a long time in coming too, because we exchanged messages on LinkedIn for a while, and then we finally circled back, and then my lineup is booked out a way. So this has been a long time coming, but a conversation I'm very much looking forward to. So and I forget, where are you in the world?
I am in sunny Copenhagen, Denmark. It's wonderful weather and it's summer, and I couldn't be more happy.
All right. Well, we're getting to that point in Wisconsin. It's warming up here, so summertime is upon us.
Nice.
So for those who may not be familiar with you, well, let's start with you, and then we'll get to Butter. What's your background in this? Because we're talking about virtual experience. We're talking about a live virtual experience platform. Why did you get involved in creating a live virtual experience? Was that your background? Was that something that you had like childhood dreams of being involved in, or where did that come from?
Oh man, like it's a super good question, and sometimes I ask myself the same thing.
Different like, reasons, whoa. Your attitude's different. Sometimes you're like, "Why did I get into this?" And then other times it's very enthusiastic.
Yeah. No, exactly. But it all, it all started during COVID. So just like longer background, I have background both in strategy consulting, and I've been in Asia building an agency. So I've done a lot of physical workshops throughout my my life. After that, I've been in Denmark. We tried to build a tech startup, failed miserably, and shut that down right before COVID. But stuck together as a team, and right when COVID struck, we kind of took our experience of building a remote company. So our previous startup was fully remote, and wanted to help people that was suddenly pushed remotely by COVID. You know, everyone's trying to figure out how to navigate this new virtual world. So we thought, okay, let's do workshops and trainings to help these startups, these teams that don't know how to work together remotely. Because we know how to do workshops, we know how to work remotely, so let's just do that and help the world, while also looking for opportunities in building a new platform.
Okay. And so really, you were going to be in the service provider, like more the professional services.
Yeah,
is that
you can say like we're using kind of a professional service provider platform to understand what issues people were facing to build to kind of build a software platform from.
All right. So you had your lab coats on. You were trying to figure out what you were
exactly.
Going to do.
We had our lab coats on. So, and the world was our guinea pigs. So, but that was when we actually saw that, hey, it's not these guys that are having the problems. It's us. Because it was just super, super difficult to navigate these remote workshops. Again, we were experienced facilitators, but it was tremendously difficult to. I think we were using Zoom and Miro and Mentimeter and a ton of different tools because we wanted to, we want to make an awesome workshop, and we used to using a lot of different tools when making awesome workshops, but total tool overload.
It becomes a Franken workshop. It really does.
Totally. Franken workshop.
It's 15 different apps open, and you're telling people, no, now go over to here. Actually, now we need you to do this. It gets a little chaotic.
Yeah, chaotic is a very nice way of putting it, Christopher.
Very nice way.
I think it was an absolute shit show for me. So we thought
this show is PG-13, so that's totally acceptable to say on here.
Yeah, I'm European, so I have a good excuse. So we thought there must be a better way. Oh yeah, and we also felt that people were totally leaning back. They weren't really engaging. They weren't getting out of their comfort zone at all, and weren't willing to get out of their comfort zone. So we thought we should be able to build something that was just inherently better, that was just totally custom built for facilitators, for people who want to do workshops, trainings, you name it, online. And that's kind of what got us to Butter back in, I think it's June of 2020 now. So kind of at our 3-year
Okay, so
anniversary.
you really were getting into it like right in, which I can see were a great opportunity, but also one of those challenging times, because while some may say, oh, start a virtual platform in the pandemic, it's going to be great. But also there would be a lot of challenges that would come with that, because it was
100%.
also absolute chaos and people were distracted for a lot of different reasons. And so the idea of spinning up something new could also feel very overwhelming and uncomfortable. And I think a lot of people probably were, I have to imagine a lot of people were clinging to what they knew at that
Exactly.
time too.
100%, right? And you're actually hitting it spot on, because a lot of people say, oh, you must have had crazy growth during COVID. And actually, that wasn't totally true, because a lot of people were, as you say, they were using the more established platforms. And it's actually been
Yeah.
post-COVID, or in kind of the aftermath, where we've seen much, much higher growth with Butter, because people have been, now they're comfortable with normal video conferencing platforms, with the established ones. Now they're feeling brave enough to explore, what say, the
Okay.
newcomers, or the ones that are a bit more niche or specialized, like ours.
Yeah. Well, and I can see that, because again, when you think about when chaos hits, people try and cling to what's most familiar a lot of
Yeah,
times. And so
exactly.
again, it's weird to think the pandemic kicked off over 3 years ago. That's weird to me to think that.
Yeah, I know, I
That's
know.
yeah, that's a little trippy thinking
Time
about that.
flies too.
But at that time,
Yeah,
I know. But at that time, I even forget, especially because my world has been in the digital space for so long. For a lot of people, this was very disruptive. Like the
yeah.
idea of working on a virtual platform was very uncomfortable. I mean, there was no shortage of funny videos on YouTube of what was happening in meetings, because people were uncomfortable. So I can see where it would be challenging to try and break into that space at that time, when people were just getting the hang of the tools that they were just using now that they weren't familiar with. So to say, hey, in addition to that, why don't you also think about this? I can see that presenting some real challenges.
Totally. And I think that was also like why our early adopters were more experienced online facilitators, because there was and still is a facilitator community that's been experienced with remote facilitation for many years, if not decades, before we kind of came out.
Yeah.
And those were the ones that were kind of our early adopters and that we initially tapped into. And since then, we've seen a big growth in facilitators in all walks of life, from people doing workshops, people doing trainings, L&D, community workshops, you name it. So it's been
Well, and so I'm actually, a question came in, and I do actually, it's a perfect timing on this one. So thanks for the question, Anne, on here, because I am curious how that challenge has shifted, because I can see the niche. People are just trying to get comfortable with it. Now you're kind of post-pandemic. So how are you seeing that challenging? Because then what new challenges has that presented? And then I actually want to go back to something on that facilitator community, which, by the way, those watching and listening who are those facilitators, give a shout out, because I know who you are. I've been part of that community for a very long time, and it's a lot less niche now than it used to be. But yeah, so I'm curious how those challenges have evolved.
Yeah, I think so. Just in terms of usage, I think we saw, 90 to 95% of all workshops went online during COVID, right? So
Like overnight.
totally overnight, right? And everyone
It
scrambling
was.
to figure out what was up and down, right? It was absolutely crazy madness, right? And I think that must have come from a number, like very low, a single digit number beforehand. Post COVID, we've seen it's hard to estimate, but I think we're seeing somewhere between 20 and 40% of workshops now going on online. And there's a lot of kind of drivers that have gotten things there. Primary driver is that people are more familiar with video conferencing now, so they don't feel that it's as weird to do workshops online. Secondary drivers have been everything from cost awareness of business travel. Big driver. It's been
Big drive, especially right now with the economic uncertainty.
Especially now with the economic uncertainty, right? It's been agencies or facilitators suddenly seeing their clientele becoming way more distributed. Suddenly, UK-based agencies had US-based clients, had clients in South Africa, you name it, right? And that's only possible through remote facilitation. and there's also become a much higher CO2 awareness and in terms of business travel. So a lot of larger organizations have reduced business travel massively because they're so focused on their CO2 budgets. So there's a lot of drivers that kind of makes that number. Maybe it's down from COVID levels, but it's definitely not down to pre-COVID.
You know, it's been interesting to watch from my vantage point on this, because to your point on this, there was, initially COVID, like you said, there was the rubber band snap and everybody suddenly had to do everything. And it was very uncomfortable. It was very clunky. Things got thrown into the virtual space with really not necessarily a lot of intention. And so it was a little clunky. And as a result, I think there was for a while this craving of, like you said, people thought this is weird. It's not what I'm comfortable with. I can't wait to go back to the way it always was. Nostalgia kind of kicked in. People remembered the good old days when we got to eat bagels and, go out for lunch type of a thing. But then I even personally am starting to see it normalize, and that distributed workforce piece. I mean, you don't have to take long to scan the news articles to see that people really want more autonomy and ability to say, I don't want to have to be somewhere to do something. I'm okay if it's an option, but I don't want to have to be required to do that. So I'm not surprised that you are still seeing the steady growth. I think, to your point, is there some that's starting to maybe go back? But honestly, in my circle of learning leaders, I would say it's kind of, the comparison I would make is early in the days of digital learning, like asynchronous learning, you had a lot of people that go, well, are we going to design for mobile or not? And it was this very like, oh, I don't know. Are we going to? And now it's just an expectation. And I would say the same thing is true with virtual learning now. It's like, if you're doing anything live in person, there is an expectation that there has to be some sort of virtual offering of it. It's not a, well, we don't offer that virtually. People will shut it down.
100%. And I think that's even true for like L&D organizations of larger corporates. They are also able to roll out programs way faster now using virtual across way more locations, for instance. That's at least something I've heard quite a bit when speaking to professionals in that circle.
Yeah. So Anna, your question, and this is why I love the audience engagement piece, because then it helps drive the conversation. This is where we're going to get into the fun part, because your comment about people having this kind of craving for live, and I think sometimes people get the mistake that live in person is different than live virtual, but I think for a good reason, because many of the memories people have, or even current experiences people have with virtual meetings, are not always positive ones, which I get the sense, what I know about Butter and having used the platform myself, you were trying to break that idea that virtual has to suck or be a second-class experience. Is that reasonable?
That's a very reasonable way of saying things, Christopher. I mean, one of the big things that we want to create with Butter is just an inherently different feel of what a video platform is, and what an online experience should be like, right? I mean, a really, if you have a master facilitator on Butter and they're running their full session on Butter, like it will feel like a finely choreographed play that you're kind of just a part of, with lots of interactivity at the right moments, and an ability to kind of lean in, and where you from the very beginning feel engaged, your energy levels are up, and where you feel, we end up on a super high note and end up with a positive feeling afterwards. That's kind of what we really want to achieve with Butter.
Yeah. Well, and you've done, and let's talk about the platform next, but that has been my response a lot when I hear people who have a bit of a negative reaction to virtual experience, because I totally understand it. And there are lots of really, really crappy virtual experiences out there. I mean, everybody can relate to the meeting you've been to where you could have been watching Netflix or going on a bike ride, and it really wouldn't have made a difference, at all, type of a thing. Or the virtual training you've been through that you could have just said, could you send me the slides? And I probably would have gotten just as much out of it as if I'd actually attended live. And I think, unfortunately, that's what many people's experiences are. So as a result, it's like, but it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, I personally have facilitated And people were like, no, it can't be more than X number of minutes. I've personally facilitated 9-hour virtual sessions, and people are like in it the whole time, but it was about how we design the experience. And so it can be fantastic, but I think that's not the experience many people have had. So let's talk a little bit about Butter, because what are some of the things that you did, or how do you differentiate that? Because I can see people struggling with like, I don't know, I've been in meeting tools and I'm struggling to see how this could be fun.
Yeah, no, it's again, I think we normally think about it in two chunks. One thing is kind of the practical, what we like, the tooling that we build, and the other is like the emotional, so more the look and feel of what we've built, right? So in terms of tooling, we built basically a fully fledged tool that allows you to set up your session, run a session, and debrief your session all in one tool. So you can set up full-fledged agendas for all of your virtual sessions, be that a training session, a workshop, or a meeting, with the tools like polls, flashcards, music, videos, all of that directly pre-planned. Then you can run that session in the same tool, so you don't need to send out links or open up a screen share all the time to show your participants things. People can join in directly in the browser. And then after the session's over, you get a full recap with everything that's happened in that session, including recordings and everything directly in Butter. Okay. So you get kind of that full workflow where where you're also able to build everything together with collaborators and co-facilitators beforehand. They're pre-invited in. It just flows, just works.
Can we talk about that for a bit for people who, because this functionality that you're talking about, to me, goes right over so many people's heads when we think about the experience, because the ability to plan and be intentional about that experience ahead of time and actually not have the facilitator distracted with trying to pull that off. I mean, I just think of what you shared before when you were doing this and you got Miro open and you're trying to open this and you got 6 browser tabs. Yeah. That's a lot if you're facilitating to try and have to execute and make sure, and oh shoot, I forgot this, and oh dang it, this isn't in the right place. And when you open a fresh meeting, I just think of, we'll use Zoom as an example. You open a fresh Zoom room, it's a blank canvas. And so there's a lot that goes into that if you're facilitating something is typically repeated. You run a session, it should run consistently the same way. And I remember we were talking a little bit about back to the Adobe Connect days. To me, that was one of the differentiators with Adobe Connect, is you could say, hey, this is this workshop. We have architected exactly how this is supposed to go, all the elements that need to happen, the transitions that you need to do, so that you didn't have those moments when you're live and the participants are sitting there and you're fumbling around with your mouse going like, hang on, I can't wait. Where's that file? And it just crushes the experience. And I think that it gets missed a lot in the discussion.
Yep. Totally. And we're very, very inspired by Adobe Connect in the early days when we were building Butter. Again, the overall idea is that you can pre-plan all the various tools that you might want to use throughout that session in what we've defined as your toolbox. And you're able to attach all these tools to various agenda points. So for instance, if you in your intro know that you're going to use this music playlist and you want to have a poll about what energy level people have today, and you want to show a quick fun video when people are coming in, all of those things, you're able to pre-plan them and quick launch them on the fly. If you know that you want to use a Miro board in your discussions, then you're able to use that and open it directly in Butter so people can collaborate in there. You don't need to get them out of the video platform to collaborate in Miro. If you know you're going to use breakouts and you want people to discuss certain things, then you can create breakout groups where people have flashcards for discussion topics in all of the breakouts directly. All of these pre-planned things, that's the stuff that you're able to do. Yeah.
But they sound really small, but on the user end, these make a big difference. I mean, I just think of breakouts. And again, for those who are listening, if you're not putting this kind of intentionality into it, it makes a world of difference. Because I just even think of breakouts. We've all been in that breakout experience where it's like, hey, everybody, we're going to do breakouts. And then you get put in the breakout room and the first 5 minutes is everybody going, what were we supposed to do in here again? Like, does anybody remember what they asked us to do? And that is a terrible experience that can feel very helpless, where you go, I don't really know what we're doing here. Why are we trying to do this? Versus if you know, hey, when they get to the breakouts, these are the questions that we want them to be discussing. Here's some of the instructions, and you can have those ready in the breakouts. That can be a seemingly small change that makes a massive improvement in the user experience.
Exactly. I think with breakouts very specifically, they're super interesting, right? Because you need to do two things. You need to make sure that there's a high level of clarity on what people are supposed to do. And you need to be able to create an intimacy among people in a very, very fast way. And those are kind of two design elements that we've thought a lot about in the way that when we've constructed Butter's breakouts.
Which, like you said, that immediate intimacy is a really important, people get uncomfortable with that word, and I get it, but it is what you need to do, because otherwise you got 4 or 5 people sitting in a room, virtual room, looking at each other, waiting, going, who's going to be the one to do it? And I don't really know. And nobody wants to be that person. So any barrier you can remove can be significant in that.
Totally. Very much agree on that.
But let's also talk the UX piece. And Mosina, let me know if I pronounce that right. I'll get to your question in a second here. But from a UX, one of the things that stood out to me the first time I used Butter was, and again, this is one of those small changes that I think is a really important distinction. It feels different. You know, we've all, in the age of virtual work, we're used to clicking on a Teams or a Zoom link or whatever link we're using in our organizations, and it almost mentally prepares you for, and here we go type of a thing. But I remember the first time I joined a Butter session, even landing on the waiting page, you're like, whoa, this is going to be a different kind of experience. And I'm guessing that that's intentional in your design.
Yeah, like we think of energy very as a key design element, right? We want people's energy to be super high from the very beginning and throughout the entire session, right? And that first touch point, the touch point of the waiting room, where we have, you know, this little gift moving, this music playing, you know, it's like we want people to be filled with kind of, well, positive energy, right? Because it's so much easier for a facilitator to work with an audience that's already kind of primed to be in a positive spot. Plus, we want to make sure that people feel that they're in a different space than a normal space. Because if you go to these kinds of sessions, if you go to a workshop, you've been part of a training session, or if you go to coaching or mastermind, or you name it, right? You want to make sure that people are not in the normal kind of productive space, or in them, oh yeah, now I'm in another meeting kind of space. You want to take people somewhere else. So that's been key to our entire experience in designing Butter. So we're using way more color. We're using way more.
It's very bright and fun.
Very bright. Yeah, exactly right. So that's been super key in our entire design experience. And
what's interesting about that is we know this from just our own lived experiences. When you think about what organizations do when they're planning an offsite or something, you're not like, hey, we're going to do this, so everyone show up at your desk in the morning, and then we're going to go into conference room B where we have all our meetings. Nobody does that for the very reason we're talking about right now, because if you did that and said, hey, today's a really exciting day, we're going to be developing you on this new thing, so show up at your desk, grab your usual coffee, and then report to conference room B, that in and of itself sets an expectation for someone of, okay, this is going to be another run-of-the-mill thing that we always do, versus, no, this is going to be distinctly different.
100%. And then they're not receptive, right? I mean, you want people to be receptive, to be malleable, to be somewhere where their mind is in a different space, right?
Yeah.
Super important.
Okay. Well, so the question, Mosina, let's jump to your question on this, and then I want to shift to another transition point. But in terms of the customer service piece, I guarantee I know the answer to this first one of, do you offer it? But I am curious what that is like from a customer experience standpoint, because I have no doubt that people who may be newer to the space or looking to really differentiate in the space, they may not always have the tools or the resources to know how to do it well. So what does that look like for you?
I think so. Firstly, it is absurdly important. And if let me also just say, if anyone's used Butter and you think we have bad customer service, please DM me, and I'll be absolutely sure to give you the best experience of your life. So
it's a personal commitment, and you said it live, so I can't even go back and like edit this.
100%.
It's live now.
So customer experience services is tremendously important, right? I think when you're trying to change something, then you need to be personally committed to do that. And I am, and we are personally committed to help out every single user or customer that we have in terms of having the best possible say use of the platform. I mean, that goes all the way from beginning of onboarding. I think every week or every other week we do like team orientation calls. Like it's either me or my coworker Cheska that does that personally to do like a quick orientation for new users. We do customer support on a daily basis. All of us chime in, and also all of us from senior leadership, we chime in on the customer service itself to have that feel with what problems the users are facing, so we're able to react to it. I actually think that customer support is one of the unsung heroes of startups, or great customer support is one of the unsung heroes. Like it's one of those things that enable you to just perform so much better than the established incumbents that are not able to offer this at scale, but don't care at the same level as you do, because it's our baby, right?
I mean, you say, and the thing is, as much as it's, I'm sure the big players would say, no, we do care. At the end of the day, it's one of those, you're doing this at scale, you've established a big enough, and I see this as an issue for a lot of companies. They reach a certain point, they hit a certain size, and you know, whether this person's unhappy or that person's unhappy, we really can't concern ourselves with that because we've got, 80 bajillion other people to deal with, and you really, in the grand scheme of things, don't matter. And I know they would never publicly say that, but I think to your point, in a startup environment, in a more intimate environment like that, you do have an opportunity to be able to support at a higher degree than you can from anyone else, which, with what we're talking about, that higher degree of intentionality in the virtual experience, I think is necessary.
100%. And it's true, because we care. And it's insane sometimes how much we end up caring, right?
All right. So I do want to, there's two areas I want to go. Well, actually, there's a lot. So we'll see how much we can fit in the time. But the first is, I can see that if you're talking to folks, who are saying, it sounds interesting, looks like, a cool tool, I can see where you'd be able to differentiate all this other kind of stuff. Inevitably, and I just know this as a learning leader for organizations, you're going to, at some point, although maybe not necessarily, but depending on the organization, you're at some point going to have to engage with your IT or your finance partners on moving forward. And inevitably, you're going to get the questions, well, we already have Zoom, Teams, whatever type of a thing. And sometimes where I've seen this go off the rails is people go into it trying to present this as a replacement for those. And then you run into all sort of IT headwinds because they're just like, listen, like this is our enterprise tool, like type of a thing. And not everybody knows how to navigate that conversation. So how do you see people, and I definitely have a point of view on this, but I'd be curious your take on how do you see people navigating that effectively? Because I can see that inadvertently shutting people down and they go, well, IT said no, when really they said no to your approach. And had you pivoted your approach, you may have a very different experience.
100%. And it's a difficult one. And it's something that I'll be honest, that we have had to try several angles to be able to successfully navigate. Again, the number one most important thing for us is to kind of establish our champions in the organizations, right? If we don't have someone that feel the value of Butter first before they begin presenting us to IT, then it's a battle that's already lost. So again, we're very focused on providing quite a lot of value, both through free trials and through a freemium platform that everyone can try out. And we even have a lot of people in large organizations that have placed their own personal credit card on and are using Butter in their, almost like in the dark of IT or under the noses, right?
I know my CISO listeners are just going like, wait, what?
Ooh, is that happening? Oh.
Well,
Yeah,
it's happening everywhere. So yeah, I get it.
I can tell you butter is spreading. It's so again.
I just got the butter is spreading joke. By the way, you know what? For folks listening, if you have any good butter puns, feel free to throw them in. That was a good one. It was sly.
Nah, it was. We could do better. Let's see. The big thing that we've seen where we've seen people be most successful in going to IT is just saying like, look, this is a different training environment. This is like, look at this is what I could do with butter. This is what I can do with butter. This is what I can do with a traditional video conferencing tool. Actually, it's not even like butter does all of these things. This normal video conferencing tool does these things, right? Something that we're seeing, that we've at least seen IT listen a lot to is more tick boxing, approach, where you need to make it very clear that the needs that you have for this particular use case are these, and Butter kind of ticks all of these various boxes, whereas Teams or Zoom only ticks these few boxes. And we're able to do that because we're a specialized tool. We're focused on this use case. So we do a lot of things that are better for this particular use case, whereas Zoom and Teams and Meet, they're general tools that can do a lot of stuff for a lot of different use cases, but they just can't go as deep as we can. So that's how we've seen people approach IT the best. But honestly, I'm not saying that we found the silver bullet yet, Christopher.
Well, but you hit on some of the big ones. And again, I think it's about having that conversation of what you're really trying to accomplish. And I think sometimes that's not enough time is put into that, where people do see a new tool and they're like, awesome. And then they run and they go say, hey, we need this. And IT starts asking legitimate questions. Why? 100%. Why do you need 100%. This versus that? Why can't you do it with this tool? And if you're not prepared for those responses and you haven't thought through the use cases, you are going to run into headwinds. And I would actually be supportive of IT saying, honestly, we're not supportive of doing this because I'm not really understanding why you can't do that. But I think some of the nuances that we're talking about are really important to be able to distinguish, where you can say the way, even what we talked about earlier, the pre-planning of a session and being able to prepare for that because it's a repeatable session, the time and cost associated with recreating the same thing over and over is actually going to outweigh the cost of having some licenses to this tool that we can then use. I think there's ways that you can structure it that, help break that down. And going in and saying, yes, we want to replace our meeting tool, just be prepared to get shut down. Like you're just going to, and I think you said before we went live, can you do that with Butter? Yes, but even you said you wouldn't necessarily recommend that that's how you use the tool.
I mean, honestly, I think for some organizations, some small organizations might sense, but I mean, do I want to roll Butter out across a 5,000 person organization as a primary meeting tool? Well, I mean, yes, I would, but I mean, I wouldn't recommend it.
I don't think you would. To be honest, though,
no,
I don't actually think you would,
right.
because from the way people use meeting tools and the way they use them and the way they're used for just kind of ad hoc spin up a thing and do all this, I actually don't think for what you'd want, you would even want to get into that space. And I think when you talk with your technical leaders and can help them understand the distinguishing difference between, hey, this is an enterprise meeting collaboration tool. This is a virtual experience event tool that is distinguishably different, and the capabilities are different.
And I think it's all, like you said it very well, it's all about arming your champions, right? I mean, you need to make sure that the people in the organization that are taking this to IT, that they actually know the main points that they need to hit.
Yeah. So something else, though, that, again, I'm just familiar enough with it to kind of pull some of these factors out. So I'd rather people understand it. But one of the other things that I know sometimes people get hung up on, and I've seen this even, IT has blown these things up. And I think you have done a really good job of focusing on an HTML5 browser first mentality. It's not that you don't have an app, but the fact that you have a browser first mentality does make a difference, because sometimes those add-ins and browser extensions and all these other things, they lead to a lot of problems in the IT infrastructure, because it starts to create things like, well, on our conference room devices, we only have like these things installed. And so we can't, we're not going to install another thing across all our IT infrastructure and manage that app to do that. Versus when you can say you truly can access this without any sort of add-in that really is a distinguishing difference and reduces the friction from a user experience standpoint.
Totally. And I mean, it's also necessary because a lot of people, like the hosts or the facilitators, will use Butter over and over, but a lot of participants, they might not be in a lot of Butter sessions, right? So asking them to create an account or download something or whatever it's a big ask. So we want to make sure that we're agnostic on that, and that people can join in as participants directly in the browser without having to install anything. So it's been a big focus point of ours. From very early days. I will say we also support mobile, and on that, like on mobile, we are asking people to download an app because there's just too many instances of stuff not going wrong or going very well.
So on that one, I actually want to ask you about this one, but before I do, Lindsay, thank you for the Butter pun. I like it. See, we got some love coming in from other things. So if anybody's got any other creative ones, share them, and we'll pin you on there. But on the mobile experience, because I've gotten this pushback, I get a little feisty on this because people will say, well, the mobile experience isn't always that great. And my challenge is, if you're asking someone to truly engage in a virtual experience, why are you even allowing them to do it on a mobile device? Because in and of itself, you are not creating an environment where they can. Now, I will say, is it different if the person has an iPad Pro and that is their main mobile device, and that's, they're treating it like a desktop experience? But I'm curious your take on that, because I struggle to see a world where you can truly engage in a meaningful virtual experience from your phone.
So, Christopher, I agreed with you for a very long time, and we were very opinionated on not launching Butter Mobile. And I think we only launched it, it's a little over a year ago, I believe, that we actually fully launched our first Butter. Still only, I forget, time flies. But we were very late in launching our mobile experience. But there was such heavy demand that we could not stem the tide any longer. And now over 50% of all joiners in larger workshops.
50%? Are you serious?
So it's
okay. You know what? I appreciate when people actually push back, because it's never fun when everybody's just nodding and agreeing. So that's actually interesting to hear too, based on data, that you're actually seeing that many users engaging in live virtual experiences from their mobile device.
Yep. And that basically means that that you need to design for mobile experiences as well. You cannot simply force people on their desktop. I do think that there's a big benefit in being desktop focused, because you've got so much more real estate to do. You can do way more interactive experiences with people, but you do need to cater for people that are only on mobile. So I think so it's been a big focus of ours to slowly get mobile up to the same level of capability that our desktop app is. Still not fully there yet, but it's something that we're actively talking about and thinking about because of this staggering number.
You know what? I actually appreciate the fact that we dug into this, because I think that's things that people need to hear as designers and facilitators, that we can't take for granted the fact that, okay, well, let's just only build this for now. Granted, I mean, I can see somebody, driving their car down the highway is probably not going to have the same experience, but again, might somebody be actively participating from their living room couch? And it's something where it's like, look, I'm not I don't want to go have to sit at my desk to participate in this. So we may actually be limiting that. Not only that, but I think that we have to also consider there's a large audience who may not be as desktop capable or have accessibility as well.
Exactly. And I think that you're hitting the hammer on the nail there, because there's a large amount of users in developing countries that are mobile first by default. And we got tons of users in, say, Brazil, Indonesia, Vietnam, and many of those, India, for that sake, many of those are mobile first, which probably also kind of affects our numbers quite a bit there. But it's super, super important. And for our mobile experience, we've been, for instance, quite inspired by games and mobile games and how they've designed their interactivity. So it is important for us that it is reasonably easy to interact with Butter from mobile devices.
No, that's, like I said, I'm really glad we brought this up, because this has even pushed my thinking on this in terms of, even as I was responding to you, I was actually starting to think, is user experience, especially with what the pandemic has done in terms of distributing people and kind of this expectation that I should be able to access something from wherever I am. Really, we can't even assume that expecting them to have a laptop with them in order to participate. We may actually be limiting our audiences or isolating them and going, oh, well, you can't, then I guess you can't participate, which is now pushing accessibility to a whole nother level.
But I will say, like, from a facilitator or a host perspective, it makes sense.
Well,
like,
yeah.
If you want to host something, like, come on. Like, we've had requests like, oh, can I please host everything on this? Like, God, hold your horses. Like,
okay.
Not gonna happen.
Okay. I agree with you on that. And I would still stand firm on that. If you are facilitating it, I don't know that you could effectively facilitate from a mobile device. There's just too much going on in terms of, moving things around, coordinating different efforts, things like that. I think that's a lot to ask somebody to do. You might be able to share some content, but actually facilitating a whole course. I respect your decision to say no. If you're hosting it, sit somewhere where because even again, going back to, you are really focused on preserving a quality user experience.
Yeah.
And it's one thing if participants are mobile, but if your host is like, yeah, I can see that really destroying the user experience.
Yep.
Okay. Wow, though, 50% of users. So I am curious, this actually, your comment about a lot of the use in Brazil and South America, which having worked in a lot of global organizations, it's always fascinating to me seeing the different cultural differences come out. It doesn't surprise me one bit that you have a large footprint in South America, but I'm actually really curious because of the fun and different element that you bring. Do you see cultural differences in terms of like where your platform really gains traction and where sometimes you have to overcome kind of some of the cultural, like, well, that's a little too informal for us type of a thing?
Yeah, like our biggest market is still the US, so that is where our largest footprint is. But where we've seen great traction has been in Southeast Asia and East Asia. It's been amazing to see a lot of positive reception around the way that we've designed the app there. Where we've seen a little bit more conservatism has been in, say, Germany and
really.
Yeah, so and part of the continental Europe, where some people have a different understanding of what professional needs to look like. So we've had some pushback there, but I mean, Germany is our fourth biggest market from a customer perspective, so it's not like it's small, but there we've had to overcome things, but that rather than where it's just been inherently positive, that our design has been more lighthearted and
I can see that, and that's what I was getting at. Is it's not so much, oh, there's just no way you can do it, because quite frankly, I have seen consistently when it comes to virtual, especially amping up that energy, making it something that really draws. It's almost like you have to do that on 10x, because if you don't, just every vulnerability that you have comes out. Like we said, your transitions are messed up because you didn't plan. You might be able to get away with it in person because you can pizzazz people with a funny joke. In the virtual world, people are like, this is taking too long and I'm bored. So I can see where, what you're doing, it would just take a little bit to help people overcome the barrier of, well, this feels a little bit too fun. Should we really be having this much fun in this experience?
I think we're seeing a shift here, Christopher, because a lot of people are used to business apps being inherently non-fun and gray and blue and white.
I don't know what you're talking about. When I think fun, I think corporate enterprise applications. That's the first thing that comes to mind for me.
There you go. I don't think I've ever heard Teams being described as fun. So
no,
not hitting on anything, but that's not an adjective I've heard. But consumer apps, come on, we're totally okay with consumer apps being fun, right?
Oh,
That's
I know.
totally all right. So, but this shift of the fun, the delight, etc., from consumer into the B2B space, into more commercial use cases, that's something we've only seen over the past, I'd say, 3-4 years, and it's something we're leaning super heavily into because people want that same level of interactivity. People are expecting the same level of interactivity from their B2B apps as they are from their consumer apps, especially say Gen Z, but I'd even
I
say
was
millennials and like, yeah.
I was going to say, I hate getting into the generational stereotypes, but I
Yeah.
do think the younger generations are pushing more of this. We're thinking about work differently. We
Yes.
are thinking about work differently, and why do we have this experience on the consumer side, but yet when we come to work, we expect, oh, it has to be stoic and boring and bland. And it's like, it doesn't have to be. And so I do see that really pushing. And I think COVID blew that up as well, because suddenly you had people where it was like, oh, I'm getting to know you as a whole person now because I know your kids and your family, and I know all of that, is really integral to the experience. So I think we're just going to continue to see some of that.
I think so too. I think one thing that surprised me though is this niche facilitation kind of community that you also mentioned before, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that are not exactly Gen Z in that community that have picked up butter with, extreme excitement, because that actually
Yep.
was what they've been front running and trying to push for years and years and years, and it hasn't come to the mainstream because these people
No,
are
no, it
in many
hasn't.
ways visionaries and thinking of, hey, this is how you should run virtual experiences, right?
No, I mean, 20 years ago, I was trying to push this in that community, and it was like rolling a rock uphill, because people were like, first of all, what? Like virtual, what the heck is the point of that? And then it was like, and you want it to be fun? Like, and it was very difficult. It was just like mind blowing to people that like this was even a thing and that it could be an actual fun experience. And I remember going, okay, but it's been challenging. And so that's why I get really excited about Butter, because this is the kind of thing that facilitator community has been going, how do we bring that degree of
Yes.
fun and energy and experience to the virtual world? And many people have just come at it from a corporate consumer app. And the reason I started laughing, Lindsay, you've gotten me twice now on this, because now I have Mary Poppins. I actually just watched both of them with my kids a couple weeks ago. And so now I actually have spoonful of sugar stuck in my head because of your line there. So yes, I agree. In every job that must be done, there is an element of fun. And I think that's exactly what you're trying to bring to that through Butter.
Very much
okay. So let's talk about the one part that I'm curious, folks who are stepping into this, because, and I've seen this, so I'm curious how you respond to this. I have seen people say, hey, we bought Butter and it didn't make our experiences magical.
Yeah.
And maybe not Butter, but I've seen even other tools where people go, I bought this tool and magically my stuff didn't change. And I tend to go, why would you think it would? That's my response. Like, why would you think that simply having the tool is an enabler of it, but there is some work that has to be done. So for those who may have just taken, say, an in-person workshop and chucked it into Zoom somewhat carelessly, and now they have this virtual workshop and they're going, man, we really need to amp this up. I can see Butter bringing a new level of flair to it, but if you're still doing the same thing you were doing before and simply doing it in Butter, I think even you would say, yeah, you're not going to see this dramatic transformation of the experience simply because of the tech.
Yes. And
okay. Hey, this is twice we've disagreed, so this is great.
So I'm actually more building on it, because we've talked a lot about this internally in Butter. Are we just building this tool for experienced facilitators to know exactly what to do and pick it up, and then they understand, oh yes, hey, this is how we're going to use it? But we actually believe that facilitation is one of those skills that need to go way more mainstream. That in a virtual world, you need to be a great facilitator, and we think that we kind of want to enable that. So no, we don't think that you can go into Butter and just do exactly what you do, use none of the tools, use none of the special stuff in there, and just kind of say, oh, but nothing worked, right? But we are, very particular about the way that we're building the experience and guiding people to use more different tools, use an agenda actively in the session, use a lot of stuff that we built pre-plan it. Like everything that we're doing in the product is leading people towards doing these things. And I do think that helps even the inexperienced facilitator or the person that might not exactly know how to do things in, making, maybe not magical, but at least, slightly better.
Well, but I think it's a fair pushback in that I agree with, and having experienced Butter and used it, there is some stuff that just, again, you've designed it as more of a consumer experience. And I do know that there are facilitators, well-intended facilitators, who just struggle with, from the technical acumen, even like, it's confusing how I get people to engage with some of this stuff. And so naturally bringing it to the surface, I can see just even again, hitting the landing page and having an element of fun on the beginning does set a different expectation than, the host has joined the meeting, they'll let you in and you got the swirl. So I can see just naturally it increasing things. But I think to your point, and what I really do agree on, is virtual facilitation skills. I think I said this in like a solo episode where I said skills every professional needs. Virtual facilitation skills is something that every professional should be building right now. And that doesn't just mean I know how to work the tool. Like, no, you need to understand how to engage people in a virtual environment. You need to know how to read the room a bit and be able to understand what's going on and how to talk with people instead of talk at people. And those are skill sets that I think we took for granted pre-pandemic, because we often assumed that because we had proximity, we were like, oh no, I'm actually pretty good at this. I do just fine. And actually you didn't, but the proximity masked a lot of your vulnerabilities, and it created a false sense of, no, I'm actually a really good facilitator because people tolerate me. And it's like, well, you locked them in a room. Like, what do you think? What options did they have? And then they're shocked when in the virtual world, people tune out and it's like, well, you weren't really a very good facilitator before. All virtual did was highlight to you where you were really weak.
100%. I mean, one of our core beliefs is this, that if you are to succeed with any kind of synchronous collaboration in the virtual, you need to be able to facilitate that session. And I mean, right now, Butter is very much focused on more the workshops and training experiences. But one of my, big visions with Butter is helping everyone that wants to collaborate synchronously virtually to basically do so better. And that's very much also by upskilling people in and supporting people in facilitation skills, because you need to facilitate these sessions. You cannot just, jump into a meeting and then look at each other and, wait for something to happen, right?
Or pull up a PowerPoint and then be like, all right, we're going to go slide by slide by slide. You can't do that. The bar is way too high.
I agree. Totally. So, yeah.
So on this one, well, no, so I want to talk a little bit about this though, because if there's, first of all, one, as you're looking at doing that, I would love to help drive some of that, because again, from a skill standpoint, I'm looking at the landscape of work, and I'm looking at where we're going from a technology standpoint. And again, I do want to maybe squeak AI into this conversation, so we'll see. But in an AI world, our need to bring our human skills to the next level is going to be critical. And to me, virtual facilitation skills is going to be one of those top skills that people need to develop if they want to differentiate, because that is going to be how you stand out in the world. We're not going back to a world where you can count on everybody being in the same location. Even if you go back to a building, you can't count on everybody being there ever at any point in time. And so virtual facilitation is virtual engagement, facilitation, leadership. That is going to become a core skill that if you don't have it, you are going to languish professionally. And so I just, as you go on that mission to help drive that, I would be more than happy to help push that forward, because I'm behind it. And I really think when people ask me, what kind of skills should I really focus on? I'm like, that is on my list of top skills I think every professional should be looking at.
Oh, that's awesome, Christopher. It seems like we're very much in alignment.
Yeah, well, I told you we'd have fun on this one. So, okay, I did say I'd squeak this in. We're going to be running out of time, so we'll see how far we get into it. But AI is ubiquitous right now. It's in the air. Everyone's talking about it. I don't know how many YouTube videos I've put out on the state of it. I have a lot of concerns about it. I have a lot of excitement about it. I have very mixed feelings about where it's going in terms of whether it's going to dehumanize us or make us distinguishably more human. And I think right now it's a choice we're going to make, and I'm not sure where we're going to go with it. But I'm curious, as you look at what's possible with AI, you did say this is an area that you're starting to look in at. How can you, and the way you described it to me is, it's going to make people more human because you're going to help that virtual facilitator be able to more humanize that virtual environment. So I'm just curious, as you're looking at the space, how you see that playing out.
Yeah, I mean, so let's take two of the simpler things first, right? I mean,
Yep.
again, as mentioned, we think about Butter as before, so preparation of the session, the during, the running of the session, and the recap, debrief, the after the session stuff, right? Before the session stuff, we've already launched what we call AI agendas now, where AI can help you generate an agenda based on a prompt, right? So if you don't know exactly how to structure a particular type of session, AI can already generate that for you. It only goes like 60 to 80% of the way, but it gives you a really great point of departure. So again, this whole like point of departure thing is great for that part. The after the session part is also pretty like that's pretty, I wouldn't say straightforward. It's very powerful in helping you basically recap everything that's happened in that session, crawl through all the conversations, the transcripts, the chat, the notes, all the documents, pull that out. We just
Yeah, because
started
there's a lot
kind
of information that you can just
so much
miss. And
information,
so
right?
being able to digest it. Yep.
Exactly. So being able to digest that and do it way faster than you'd be able to do as a person, it can surface a lot of those things much, much faster. And we're just launching some of our newest features on that next week.
Okay.
Now, something I'm also personally excited about, and that's kind of what you mentioned about this whole idea of an AI co-facilitator. And one of the big things and one of the big challenges that we kept hearing facilitators have when we launched was this idea of feeling the room. Like they felt like suddenly when you're in a virtual room, you lost the touch with the participants. You didn't know exactly how people felt and stuff. And we built a lot of stuff that helps people go there. But I think that the AI co-facilitator being able to listen into the conversation, being able to read the chat on an ongoing basis, and being able to kind of feed you smart kind of insights on what's going on in the room is going to be a huge thing. We haven't cracked this yet. It's totally conceptual, but I'm super excited about where this can go because it can really help alleviate this lack of senses that you end up having.
So again, if there's anything I can do to help with this, right, let me know, because I think that specifically is a huge opportunity area, again, as we look at upskilling the next generation of virtual facilitators, because the reality is it's hard. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 odd years. And even for me, it can get overwhelming, even like running one of these and trying to monitor the chat and see who's engaging and Lindsay, commenting on Lindsay's thing along the way. There's a lot that you have to do. And so being able to have something powered by AI that's allowing you and giving you indicators. I mean, I just even think with where we don't have time to go down the rabbit hole, but where we are with natural language understanding, even simple things like monitoring things and giving indicators of, hey, shut up, facilitator, you're talking too much, right? In a fun way to kind of go, do you know you're dominating the room? You've talked 90% of the time, you need to be quiet, or you haven't stopped talking in X long. The possibility of those real-time indicators of things that we know, like, hey, this is an area that we really want to, use technology to help and make it scalable.
Yep, totally. And funny you should say that, because last week we just launched our talk time indicators. So now you know exactly like percentages and stuff, and then it helps you understand like, are you just monologuing all along, or is Bob over there? Is he totally taking over the conversation because kind of feel like he is, and all of these things. So yeah,
and I think that's the kind of future that's, to me, is very bright with what we can do with this technology, because we can start to see things that, I mean, we have our own cognitive biases. We think we're really engaging and we're not. Oh, I'm not talking too much. I feel like it was really, I don't know. What does the data say? Because the data says that out of 59 minutes, you were talking 56 of them. So I actually don't think you were engaging people quite as much as you wanted, just because you said any questions and then paused for 5 seconds. So I love it. I love it. 100%. Well, I could just continue on and do probably a much longer session with you than we did here, but I so appreciate this conversation, Jakob. And also all of you listening and engaging in the chat. Not only did you give me some good laughs, but I appreciated the questions that came in as well. So thank you as active participants in that. And again, very excited with what you're doing with Butter. Very excited how you're looking at helping improve virtual facilitation. And again, make the virtual experience not suck. So thank you for being here and for sharing where you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, no, I'm super happy to do that, Christopher. And by the way, if anyone wants to check out Butter, just go to butter.us and then you can sign up for free.
All right. There you go. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you back here next week.